The Devil's Advocates radio show is broadcast under a time brokerage agreement between Devil Radio and Civic Media, Inc. Some portions of this program may be pre-recorded. Warning, you are about to listen to the greatest radio show ever, and due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves and corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. Now live from the Civic Media Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning, welcome to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Friends proving it's never personal, only politics. Please allow me to introduce myself. And now, here's your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome to the Devil's Advocates radio show. I am your host, Dominic Salvia. Crute is still on vacation. He promises, he swears he'll be back tomorrow in studio, ready to rock and roll just in time for the Friday. So thank you for joining us. Nate is on the board. You can join us at 844-967-2789. Got a big show lined up for all of you today. And seriously, appreciate you tuning in. I know you have lots of options, lots of tunes out there, lots of things to distract us from the issues, but you're tuning in here because you want to know what's happening and my own little personal twist on it. And I do appreciate that. We take it very seriously most of the time. Today at 4:30, Michelle Velasquez, she is the Director of Legal Advocacy and Services for Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, joining us at 4:30. Planned Parenthood asked Wisconsin Supreme Court to find the 1849 abortion law unconstitutional. Lots of moving parts to this. We know, what was it? A district attorney from Sheboygan County also wanted the Supreme Court in Wisconsin to chime in on this. We're going to talk to Michelle at 4:30. At 5 o'clock, the national news with our pal James Santel, former U.S. attorney, of course, host. Morning Cannoli, I believe, still called at Civic Media at 7 to 9 on Saturdays here. Jim's going to join us at 5 o'clock, kind of recap some of the legal travails. And, of course, this Hunter Biden this impeachment of Joe Biden effort by the Republicans just imploding because, of course, they're using what? Russian plants? I don't know. We'll get to it and all the updates on the Trump cases as well. Michelle Velasquez, James Santel. Of course, you on the phones, 844-967-2789. Some of the local headlines I want to throw out there real quick. Paul Ryan thinks Mike Gallagher could run again. So what? Let's move along, Paul Ryan. I mean, can't you cash in checks? But the Wisconsin Assembly, they're working. They're working, folks. Have no fear. The Wisconsin Republicans are here, and they're working for you. I'm going to go a long way to get to a point. So bear with me and stick around. Mitchell Schmidt reporting at the Madison.com, the Wisconsin State Journal. Wisconsin voters could decide in August if the legislature should have final say over how the governor spends federal funds allocated to the state. But they're gonna take away more power from the governor. Now, you think they'd be doing this if it were still Governor Scott Walker, Republicans? I kind of doubt it. The Assembly voted along party lines on Thursday, with all Democratic lawmakers opposed to advance a proposed constitutional amendment that seeks to limit the governor's authority over how some federal funds are spent in Wisconsin. The chamber also voted 63-33, with Democratic reps Sylvia Ortiz-Velez of Milwaukee and Sheila Stubbs of Madison joining Republicans in support of the measure to advance a separate proposed constitutional amendment that would bar local and state officials from closing churches in a state of emergency. Now, folks, you know how I am here. This one really, really gets me as the non-believer here. Assembly Joint Resolution 6 now heads back to the state Senate, which is planning to hold at least one more floor period next month. If approved there, the question will come before voters on the August 9th primary. The resolution would give the legislature final say over how the governor spends federal funds allocated to the state. Republicans sought to secure more control over the money after Governor Evers oversaw the distribution of billions of federal COVID relief funds pumped into the state. Well, the Republicans, they didn't get a chance to divert that to have an input on that, so they're very mad about that. A Senate Joint Resolution 54 needs to pass both chambers again in the 25-26 legislative session. If it does, It would come before the voters as early as April of 2025, according to the Legislative Reference Bureau. The proposal would clarify, this is the one that gets me, local and state officials, quote, may not order the closure or forbid gatherings in places of worship in response to a state of emergency at the national, state, or local level, including an emergency related to public health. Rep. Ty Bowden, from a Republican from Hilbert, Wisconsin, said this before the vote. I'm sure, like in the past, if there is an emergency that arises in the future, places of worship will make the right choices. Really? You're going to give a pass to the churches and the synagogues and the mosques and the whatever they claim to be a religious organization? If there's a national, state, or local emergency, they don't have to abide. We're going to continue to give a pass to the quote unquote religious people because they're quote unquote religious. The proposal is largely in response to the state's 2020 stay-at-home order, which limited indoor church gatherings during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Wisconsin Supreme Court ultimately struck down that order. Again, this was the conservative Wisconsin Supreme Court. But Republicans have since introduced measures to prevent such a thing from happening again. Conservatives also lost a Wisconsin Supreme Court case in 22 seeking to prevent unelected public health officials from ordering public health mandates without the approval of local officials. Again, these same kind of things, right? Evers in 21 vetoed a bill that would have banned local public health orders from closing or limiting gatherings in places of worship. In his veto message, Evers said he objected to the measure's intent to take away existing tools available to state and local public health officials to combat COVID-19. Now, of course, unlike bills, the governor cannot veto constitutional amendments. Such measures must pass 2 successive legislative sessions before voters have the final say. If enacted, such changes can only be reversed through the same amendment process or by a court order. Some conservative groups have pressed the legislature to pursue more constitutional amendments to enact or preserve legislation after the Wisconsin Supreme Court shifted to a liberal majority for the first time in more than a decade. And while they can't be vetoed, constitutional amendments can be challenged in court, which would put the proposals before the same liberal Supreme Court majority that conservatives are trying to avoid. Another proposed amendment working its way through the legislature would bar the state from receiving private funds to help administer elections. Again, if we properly funded our elections, we wouldn't have to worry about taking in private money to fund elections. I'm totally down with that. I don't want billionaires, going to their pocket to help, local communities run elections. I mean, we should be paying for that. It should be easy. It should be open. It should be fair and transparent for everyone, regardless of the cost. But of course, they're very mad about that. Remember the history on this. Republicans proposed it in response to private election grants provided to cities in 2020 by the Chicago-based Center for Tech and Civic Life. The Zucker bucks, as they say. They say they were used to unfairly increase turnout in Democratic strongholds of Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, Kenosha, and Racine. So they want to limit the ability for people to donate their money to help fund elections. Because, of course, we know Republicans love it when people don't show up to vote. That generally helps them. Another would amend the state constitution provision allowing that every United States citizen 18 or older who is a resident of an election district in the state is a qualified elector of that district. To state that only United States citizen could vote in the district, the measure is meant to head off initiatives in other states to allow non-citizens to vote in some local elections. So the Republicans, knowing they can't get these kinds of bills passed because Governor Evers probably would not sign them, are now going directly to the people to make to get your opinion. What do you think? Let the people decide, the Republicans would tell you. But the church stuff, folks. I mean, as the resident atheist on the panel here, and I grew up in a Catholic family. I was baptized, never confirmed, but parents never really, they tried to read the Bible once in a while, never really stuck. I remember some really, some phases they went through when I was a child, watching some really weird movies about the rapture. I mean, things that stick with you. Talk about grooming, you know what I mean? Talk about impacting a kid. I remember these movies from when I was like 4 to 6 years old. They had that kind of an impact on me. I mean, when you're talking about, eternal damnation, you don't think that impacts children? I mean, come on, people. And so to put forth a constitutional amendment, an effort to just give churches a pass. Hey, you got a pandemic going on? Doesn't matter. We're a church. We don't have to abide. And to suggest, as the Republican legislator did prior to the vote, that don't worry about it. They'll do the right thing. Really, they'll do the right thing? I mean, is that what you believe? If everyone did the right thing, we wouldn't need laws, right? We wouldn't need constitutional amendments, right? Quote unquote, the right thing. And this whole religious freedom thing, and there's articles all over the place over the last several days regarding the Christian nationalism. We saw the Nashville Nazis, right? We saw those folks marching last week. The same kind of crew that was in Madison not so long ago. But to have, folks embrace this Christian nationalism, to have special rules carved out for religious organizations that don't have to abide by any sort of, order from a legislature or from health officials. Oh my God, there's a pandemic going on. You guys really you can't do it. You can't go worship. Can't do it. Nope. We want to, because it's our religious freedom. So you're going to put yourself and your congregation and your friends and neighbors in danger so you can go, pray in public? Didn't the Bible say something about praying in private? I don't know. And above and beyond that, all the rules we already give a pass for the religious organizations. Are you kidding me? Come on. Pay some property taxes, people. They get a pass. Man, I lived in Whitefish Bay, a little suburb north of Milwaukee, for a long time. Big Catholic church with a school next to it. Beautiful building. Really, it's like 2 city blocks. No taxes. No, they get a pass. You get a pass for no taxes. If you confess your sins, well, the priest doesn't have to relay that information to the authorities. And of course, you get involved in any child molestation. Well, we'll handle that internally. I'm about done with all this religious freedom thing. How about everyone works under the same rules? How about that? That's equality. That's freedom. When we all got to pay the property taxes, when we all have to abide by the local health order, you don't get a pass because you happen to believe in some mythical creature. Folks, we're the devil's advocates. It goes beyond that. It goes onto this in vitro fertilization. It goes on to the abortion. This is their basis for everything. It's their Christian nationalism. We'll get to more of it. Your calls are welcome as well. 844-967-2789.
92.7 WMDX.
This is Chad Spate for Chad's Design Build. We're proud to employ some of the best carpenters and remodeling professionals in our industry. Are you honest and hardworking? Do you love to improve people's lives by improving their homes? Chad's Design Build offers excellent compensation and benefits focused on outstanding customer service, professional design, construction management, and craftsmanship, all in a nurturing, positive workplace. Whether you're thinking about remodeling your home or considering joining our team, go to chadsdesignbuild.com to learn more.
Hey folks, Stephanie Miller here. As an enlightened progressive, you know how important it is to do business in accordance with your politics. That's why Solidarity Realty is my favorite real estate firm in Madison. Solidarity Realty is a local independent realty company that lives their values. They provide outstanding expertise and protect your best interests while building community and promoting sustainability and diversity. Vive la resistance! Find them today at solidarityrealty.com. And don't forget, tell them
The Devil's Advocates, radio for nasty women everywhere.
And we are back from the 420 break. Thank you so much for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Going to go to the phones in just a moment. 844-967-2789. Of course, stick around. Michelle Velasquez, Director of Legal Advocacy and Services from Wisconsin, Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, going to join us at the bottom of the hour. But I've been ranting a little bit here. The exceptions and the belief system and what the religious folks want. They want to pass on all sorts of things. They want to force their beliefs down my throat. I mean, this is and you can think what you want, and we all have the right to believe what we want. And you know what? We're all going to find out sooner or later. We all came from the same place. We're all going to the same place. That's my belief. Now, and I don't believe any of it. Today's religion to me is tomorrow's mythology. You know what I'm saying? But I guarantee you, somebody died at the altar of Thor, or not being, for defending or wanting to overtake, or whatever the case is. All the religions and all the gods and all the things in all the world over all eternity, we're just happen to be in the one. And as a non-believer, everyone that believes, whether you're a Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu, whatever your case is, your normal quote unquote religion, well, you probably don't believe other ones. So we're all non-believers to some degree. I just take mine, one religion further, the one that you perhaps believe in. Well, that's fine. We all got to do what we got to do to get through the day. And if you want to believe in that and you want to worship, you're not hurting anybody, and it makes you feel good, it gives you a sense of community, knock yourself out. But when you start taking those beliefs and translating them into constitutional amendments, translating them into laws, which would dictate, how I get to live my life, and which it would limit my freedoms, well, then I have some problems with that. So that's the underlying theme here. And I know I try not to harp on it too much. Who wants to hear the atheists all the time? And Crute claims he's a believer. I believe if he says he's a believer, but come on, you know what I mean? So but it's an underlying theme for lots and lots and lots of these issues that we deal with on a regular basis, and certainly historically as well. And let's go to this one. The ABC News reporting, President Joe Biden Thursday blasted the Alabama Supreme Court ruling that said frozen embryos are considered children in the state. Biden said it was outrageous and unacceptable. You know how I know embryos aren't children? Because if I took my kid and put them in the freezer, they'd die. Here's what the president said. Today in 2024 in America, women are being turned away from emergency rooms and forced to travel hundreds of miles for health care, while doctors fear prosecution for providing an abortion. And now, a court in Alabama has put access to some fertility treatments at risk for families who are desperately trying to get pregnant. The disregard for women's ability to make these decisions for themselves and their families is outrageous and unacceptable. As ABC News goes on to write, on Tuesday, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that unborn children are children, quote unquote, without exception, based on developmental stage, physical location, or any other ancillary characteristics. The unprecedented decision could impact the future of in vitro fertilization treatments in the state, and several IVF providers have paused parts of their care to patients for fear of legal risks. Biden said the court's decisions is a direct result of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Biden said he will work to restore Roe v. Wade. However, with a divided Congress, it could be challenging. Biden also said this. My message is the vice president and I are fighting for your rights. We're fighting for the freedom of women, for families, and for doctors who care for these women. And we won't stop until we restore the protections of Roe v. Wade and federal law for all women in every state. Biden's campaign directly blamed former President Donald Trump for the Alabama court ruling, saying it was only possible because Donald Trump's Supreme Court justices overturned Roe v. Wade. Trump appointed 3 conservative justices while he was president. Another quote here. This is from Julia Chavez Rodriguez, the Biden-Harris campaign manager. Quote, across the nation, MAGA Republicans are inserting themselves into the most personal decisions a family can make, from contraception to IVF. With their latest attack on reproductive freedom, the so-called pro-life Republicans are preventing loving couples from growing their families. If Donald Trump is elected, there is no question he will impose his extreme anti-freedom agenda on the entire country. Vice President Kamala Harris denounced the court's decision. The decision is outrageous. It is already robbing women of the freedom to decide when and how to build a family. Harris wrote that Biden would sign a bill reinstating the protection of Roe v. Wade if Democrats win majorities in Congress, though such legislation would need 60 votes in the Senate. Trump hasn't apparently weighed in on the Alabama court ruling or Biden's comments. Congressional Republicans have been noticeably quiet on that topic, too. Well, on a side note, my understanding as well, Donald Trump apparently behind closed doors is down for a 16-week abortion ban, although he's very angry that got out. Nikki Haley, Trump's opponent in the Republican primary, said Wednesday that she agrees with the court ruling, telling NBC News that embryos, to me, are babies. Embryos are not babies. Babies are babies. Embryos are embryos. Zygotes, cells, sperm, eggs. I mean, really? This is what we're going to do? And what is the basis for all of this? What is it? It's religion. You can't argue the science, so you got to argue the supernatural. You got to base it in, my religious freedom says this. Well, you know what? If you don't want to have IVF, don't have it. You want to have an abortion? Don't do it. You don't want to have gay sex? Don't engage. You know what I mean? You don't have to do these things. Why is it? Why do you think that you get to take whatever belief that you concocted, that you were drilled into your head as a kid, or whatever you felt to believe in, must force it on everybody else? I'm not forcing my atheism upon you. I'm giving you my point of view. I would appreciate it if you kept your beliefs as your point of view and not try to litigate it, not try to make it constitutional, or not try to get it passed into law. 844-967-2789. Couple callers before we get Michelle Velasquez in LA. Tom, you're up. Happy Thursday, Tom. What do you got for us?
Hey, buddy. First
Hey, man.
off, we the people ultimately are the government, and we must never forget it. Corporations are not the government. Second, Joe Biden actually gave a lot of student debt relief today, so I hope everyone knows that. Another thing that Joe Biden has done for we the people. Third, I am so sick of these people. They don't even know what Christianity is, and it really saddens me that they're actually use Christ's name, I would say, in vain by calling themselves Christian nationalists, because the Christ I knew, the one that I look at as my role model, I don't even know if he was I think we're all sons of God or whatever, but it was not, he said, take care of my sheep. We all are sheep, and the shepherd is supposed to take care of the sheep. As far as I'm concerned, all of these people that are in these right-wing churches and all of these priests and everybody like that actually disobey, taking care of the sheep, there's a special place in hell for these people.
Well, Tom, all they got to do is ask for forgiveness, and there it is. Thanks for calling. Squeeze one more in. Jim from Madison, I can give you about 60 seconds. Jim, what do you got?
Look, they generated the embryos from men doing something to themselves in order to create the embryos. Are the guys that did that, are they just as guilty? I mean, how far are you going to take it? You're going to prosecute young boys for exploring exploring themselves? I mean, this is freaking ridiculous.
I know. No masturbation. Every sperm is sacred, Jim. All right, and then you're guilty of killing millions of people. Hell, even if it's a half person, right? There's a lot of people when you add up all the halves of millions of sperm. It's absolutely ridiculous, and we need to call it out. And again, I don't want to be disrespectful, folks. Enjoy what you want, believe what you want. But if you're going to put it on me, you better be ready for some pushback. Michelle Velasquez, she is the Director of Legal Advocacy and Services for Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. She's coming up next. Stick around.
Talking sports and also more live from Hayward at the Birkenbeiner right here on the Civic Media Radio Network.
Civic Media News. I'm Terry Bell. Here's what Wisconsin needs to know. Governor Evers says he has no plans to sign a Republican bill to spend tens of millions of dollars to address PFAS pollution. He says in a letter to lawmakers it puts too many enforcement limits on the State Natural Resources Board. The Senate passed the bill in November, and the Assembly is set to pass it today. The U.S. Department of Education is offering breaks on student loans. Cora Hume is with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She says borrowers with non-federally held loans need to consolidate them into a direct consolidation loan by the end of April.
Older borrowers are less likely to hold direct loans, which would already benefit from this pay count adjustment. And then those that do own direct loans, they're less likely to participate in this IDR program that caps their monthly payments.
Hume says the savings has the potential to change lives. I'm Terry Bell, Civic Media News. Now here's what you need to know closer to home.
For WMDX News, I'm Nate Wegehout. With spring just around the corner, officials across Dane County are gearing up to start controlled burns in parks and wildlife areas. Controlled prescribed burns are an important tool for managing Wisconsin's native plants and wildlife. Several burns will occur throughout Madison at places like Sugar Maple Pond and the Upper Badger Mill Creek area. They'll begin next month, though fire department officials can only do the burns when weather conditions are right and cannot give exact dates for when they will occur. Goodwill of South Central Wisconsin wants to help people with their taxes. They're launching their free VITA tax preparation program to help people get the most out of this tax season. The program is designed for low to moderate earners, the elderly, people with disabilities, and limited English speakers. It's all run through volunteers. You can register for the program online at the Goodwill of South Central Wisconsin website. And that's what you need to know. I'm Nate Wuggyhout, WMDX News.
Hi, I'm Mike Crute, and I've signed my share of commercial real estate leases. In Madison, I highly recommend Jeff Jansen from Alta's Commercial.
Hello, Michelle. Can you hear me there?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Let me just do some stuff here. This is Nate. I'm the producer of the show here. Would you mind just talking for me for just a second here, just so I can see your sound levels?
Yeah, sure. No problem. Nice to be here this afternoon. Thanks.
Yeah, and your levels look good. I'm not too loud on your end?
No.
All right, awesome. Then, yeah, just a couple of quick things. Let me pull down this ad break screen. I'll be giving time cues throughout the segment there. So when we have 5 minutes left, 3 minutes, stuff like that. When you start hearing music, that means that we have about a minute left until the end of the segment there.
Okay.
That just sort of means just begin to wrap stuff up a little bit. Finally, we are live radio. Please no swearing. I have to remind everyone.
Wait, what?
Even Dom.
I'm out then. I'm not doing this.
Otherwise, yeah, we have a little over a minute left. I'm going to go Mike's quiet, and yeah, we'll be ready to go. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
I'm meteorologist Brittany Merlot. Another sunny and spring-like day today as highs climb to the mid and upper 50s. Winds become breezy tonight as a cold front smacks us tomorrow, sparking a few flurries to fly around, with around a trace to about a half an inch possible to accumulate, and highs remaining much cooler. Currently, it's 58.
It's 2024 and Worthington, Minnesota continues to shine. We've expanded so many things. It's a time of growth. We've expanded recreation activities with our indoor ice arena, our indoor turf rec center and playground, and our outdoor water park Waterworld is ready for another season. Our schools have expanded and so has our industry. We're continuing to expand our population also, with lots ready to build on Glenwood Heights. So let's grow together. In Worthington, Minnesota, it's worth a look.
Whether you're hanging out on State Street or hanging out on the lakes, thanks for listening. This is Mad Radio 92.7 WMDX.
The Devil's Advocates, tackling the issues you're not allowed to talk about at the dinner table.
Yeah, thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Super excited to introduce Michelle Velasquez. She is the Director of Legal Advocacy and Services for Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. Michelle, welcome to the Devil's Advocates radio show.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is our pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Big news, saw it in the AP. Planned Parenthood asking the state Supreme Court to overturn what 174-year-old state law that conservatives have interpreted as an abortion ban. I got a few questions on this, Michelle, but let's start with the actual filing. What are we trying to do here, and what's the process?
Sure. So today, Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin filed a petition for original action, which means we are asking the Supreme Court to take jurisdiction of this case. And the questions that are being presented to the court really involve interpretation of our state constitution. We are asking the court to interpret Article 1, Section 1, which guarantees all persons born the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we are asking the court to interpret among those rights that are inherent, the right to bodily autonomy, the right to self-determination, which of course includes the right to choose when and if to become a parent. And in that, the right to choose an abortion and the right of providers to provide that care.
And how about the timing? Why now? What is it about the circumstances and this topic now that makes this appropriate time to do the filing?
Sure. So when Roe was overturned back in the summer of 2022, we always knew sort of the long-term goal would be to obtain an interpretation of our state constitution that solidified this right, that made it clear that Wisconsinites have this right. And in the early days post Dobbs, the Attorney General filed his lawsuit. That case was sort of in its infancy at that time. Now that case has a final decision from the Dane County Circuit Court. The respondent in that case, District Attorney Ermansky from Sheboygan, filed just a couple of days ago a petition to bypass the Court of Appeals and is asking the Supreme Court of the state to take that case. And so really the timing is now. So for the court to answer not just the questions presented in the call case, but really to reach this ultimate question about what protections are afforded under our state constitution.
And that was kind of my question, Michelle. These are little slightly different cases. The call case has already, as mentioned, said that this does not apply. This is not about abortion. This is infanticide. But your position, or at least Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, wants to clarify that infanticide portion of it. Is that what you're telling me?
No. So really what we're asking the court to do is examine 940.04, which the Dane County Circuit Court, as you mentioned, has already said that doesn't apply to abortion. That applies to feticide only. But District Attorney Ermansky has continued to move forward with his theory of the case, which is that 940.04 applies to abortion, and that when Roe was overturned, it reinvigorated that force of law of that statute. And so we are basically saying to the court, even if that statute does apply to abortion, it could not stand because it unconstitutionally infringes upon these inherent rights that all Wisconsinites have.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Michelle Velasquez, the Director of Legal Advocacy and Services for Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. Michelle, so as far as abortion providers are concerned, my understanding, Planned Parenthood is providing the health care as needed, but other hospitals are not because of the issue, the concerns of the legality that we stand in right now. What's your impression of how things are looking in that regard?
Yeah, so Planned Parenthood resumed services back in September in our Milwaukee Health Center and our Madison Health Center. And then in December, we resumed abortion care at our Sheboygan Health Center. I can't speak specifically to what other hospitals or health systems are doing, but what I can say is that ever since Roe was overturned, there has been a lot of confusion, I think, around the state amongst patients and providers about what sort of the extent of care looks like that they're able to provide. And even though right now we're able to provide care because the Dane County Circuit Court said this old law actually doesn't even apply to abortion, the future of abortion access is really sort of uncertain until I think we have some constitutional guardrails that let us know, hey, this right is protected. The government can't just come in and restrict this law or restrict this access to this important health care. And it gives some guardrails for the legislature, not just now, but legislatures in the future about what they can and can't restrict when it comes to abortion care.
Michelle, in a similar issue, the in vitro fertilization, the Alabama Supreme Court has now declared that embryos are children. And it's along the same lines. It's reproductive care. It's about women choosing what to do with their bodies and when to engage and when to have families and engaging with their doctors as they see fit. So to me, it's kind of along the same vein. What's your sense on that Alabama ruling, and where do you think that's going to go?
So absolutely, in vitro fertilization is part of the full scope of sexual and reproductive health care. It is a medical process that a lot of people choose to pursue in order to have families. I don't know where that case is headed. I would imagine that folks will be appealing, and it might make its way all the way up to, who knows if it will make its way to the Supreme Court or if it's going to head to the federal circuit courts. But that is the exact, I think, kind of thing that we will be seeing more of around the country as these sort of battles and questions about rights to aborted by the federal Constitution becomes more and more of a state issue. And so that is why it is extremely important in our view for the Wisconsin Supreme Court to have a word on whether or not our state constitution protects the right to access that health care.
And as we've seen with this particular ruling, it seems the conservatives are pushing, and contraception could be next, depending on how they define it and what they decide may or may be acceptable for us or not acceptable for us. Have we seen any movement on efforts to try to ban certain kinds of contraception here in the state?
Not to my knowledge in this state. I think that is certainly something that's on the table in other states. And, the overturning of Roe was a 50-year-long strategy on the part of the anti-movement. And contraception restrictions is something that's absolutely on the table for folks. And again, we're seeing that in other states. And that's why the questions presented in our petition today really are about these inherent rights to self-determination and bodily autonomy, which would then, also include the right to contraception. When Roe was overturned in the Dobbs decision, Justice Thomas called into question some of the other types of rights that were sort of rooted in that right to privacy. One of which was the right to contraception.
The executive director of Wisconsin Right to Life, in the AP News article that I saw, is basically accusing Planned Parenthood of disregarding the lives of the unborn to, quote, for the sake of their bottom line. Michelle, what's your response to that?
I think that this petition today really speaks for itself, and this is about valuing the rights of all people in this state, particularly people who can become pregnant, to choose the path in life that they see fit for them. Our Constitution clearly states that all people are born equally free and have these all people born have these inherent rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so really at the core of this petition is our deeply held value that people should have the ability to make these deeply personal decisions for themselves in consultation with whomever in their life they'd like to be in consult with, including their doctor.
Michelle, you talk about the attacks on Roe v. Wade. I mean, this has been a 50-year strategy, as you mentioned, and certainly the defense of Roe v. Wade and the efforts to continue to allow women to make their own healthcare decisions. Very important. But on the losing side at this point, of course, this is another election year. What is Planned Parenthood? I know you have different political portions and advocacy portions and whatnot. But what is Planned Parenthood doing? How can you engage with other folks on this topic to try to keep this at the top of the list of people's minds as they go into vote and decide who they want to represent them in government?
Yeah, so you're right. Planned Parenthood has an advocacy arm called Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin. So people who are interested in knowing what Planned Parenthood is doing in electoral politics work, in civic engagement, in community organizing, that is all. Those are all available. All the information is available at the Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin website. They are engaged with communities all year round on this issue. And so, for example, there's when there's new legislation, there's a lot of education around that. There's sometimes some some grassroots lobbying, direct lobbying, things like that. So if people are interested in that end of things, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Wisconsin is the website to check out.
Michelle Velasquez, Director of Legal Advocacy and Services for the Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. Okay, so this petition was filed. What's your expectation? What's the timeline? What are the requirements? And what are you hoping for as far as this actually getting a decision made on it?
Sure. So this is a petition that's just saying to the court, basically, we think you should take this case, and this is, it outlines our argument. The court could deny the petition and not grant our motion, essentially, to hear the case. The court could also ask for responses from the respondents or defendants in the case. They would have a certain period of time in which to do that, and then the court would make a decision about hearing the case. And that there isn't really a deadline for the court to do that. So I would expect it to be several weeks, if not a couple of months, before we hear anything. If the court does take the case, then we'll know when our briefs are due. We'll have an oral argument schedule, and then ultimately a decision. We believe in our arguments wholeheartedly. We think our state constitution compels the result we're asking for, which is a state constitutional right or a state constitutional protection for abortion care. And so we'll have to see what the court decides. But if the court doesn't take the case, the fight, the legal fight isn't over. We'll explore other avenues at that point.
And Michelle, I'm not clear how this works. I mean, obviously, the Sheboygan County DA, Joel Urmanski, filed an appeal to that one case. Would they combine these? I mean, these are obviously related cases. How do you see that playing out in the best case scenario?
Yeah, so the court could absolutely sort of join these cases together and as sort of companions to one another and hear them at similar times. So that would be a decision for the court, but that's certainly something the court could decide makes the most sense.
Excellent. Michelle, appreciate you joining us. Michelle Velasquez, Director of Legal Advocacy and Services at Wisconsin Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. Michelle, people want to find more about what's going on, more about these legal briefs and other, again, there's this side, the legal of it, there's advocacy on the other side, but you're doing great work holding the line, standing up for women's rights here in the state of Wisconsin. Where can they find more information if they want to get involved?
So they can find us on Facebook, Instagram, either of the websites, either the ppwi.org or ppawi.org will take them to all things Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin.
Excellent. Michelle Velasquez, Director of Legal Advocacy and Services. Thank you so much for joining the Devil's Advocates. Please keep us informed. Come around anytime you want. We'll let the people know the work that you're doing to help the people of Wisconsin. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Michelle. We are the Devil's Advocates, coming back your phone calls at 844-967-2789. And of course, James Santel, who's the former U.S. attorney, friend of ours, host in the Civic Media Network. He's going to join us in the 5 o'clock happy hour. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Of the John and Gordy Show.
Partner now with the greatest radio show ever and start getting return on your investment immediately. The Devil's Advocates are a small business just like you, and like you, we can't afford advertising that offers no return. The Devil's Advocates listeners support our sponsors and the mission. Tell you when your messages are working and put cash in your register. So invest your ad dollars to reach our raving Madison and Dane County fans, or affordably reach the whole state, Chicago, Minneapolis, and our nationwide stream audience today. The Devil's Advocates can be the voice of your business, hold special events at your location, interview your staff for satisfied customers to lift your business. Contact us today, Crute at DAR.
We do have Jim on the call. Just a heads up, Dom.
Got him on the what?
He's on the StreamYard. Jim will take you at the top of the hour.
Okay.
We can't hear him yet.
Okay. Talk you can't ignore. Mad Radio 92.7 WMDX.
The Devil's Advocates. Never personal, only politics.
Thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates Radio Show. You can join us on the line, 844-967-2789, or you can just download the super cool Civic Media app. You can click on the button. It'll automatically call us. It will automatically text. Oh, I got to text. I got to check the text line. You got to help me, Nate. I always forget. Crute usually does the text line. But again, the Civic Media app, go to your local, your favorite app store and download the Civic Media app. It's super cool. Take the devils with you everywhere you go. I want to thank Michelle Velasquez, Director of Legal Advocacy and Services over at Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin. Republicans, they just keep on trying to keep on trying. Just briefly on here from the AP article on this topic, Planned Parenthood seeking a broad ruling, arguing that the Wisconsin's Constitution declaration that people have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness means women have a right to control their own bodies. The petition goes on to argue that the phrase grants abortion providers the right to practice and means all people have equal right to make their own medical decisions. You know, the fact that we even have to have this argument that the people have right to make their own medical decisions, like, are you kidding me? Of course they do. At least in my world, if you're not, in some sort of religious, fanatical, Christian nationalist organization where you rely everything on what you interpret the Bible to be. And that's what we heard from Mega Mike Johnson, right? The Speaker of the House. the fifth guy they finally got to. If you want to know his worldview, just read the Bible. And of course, what about the contradictions in your Bible? Very concerned about the gay marriage, right? Man laying with another man, Leviticus, but perhaps less concerned about the mixing of the wools and the linens, also in Leviticus. Perhaps less concerned about the all-you-can-eat at Red Lobster. Apparently, Red Lobster stopping the all-you-can-eat lobster because they're losing money. Well, how many of those folks are jamming on that lobster? Well, you're not supposed to eat shellfish, right? Isn't it also in the Bible? Pretty sure slavery was condoned in the Bible, right? And didn't in our history we had lots of folks claiming, oh well, we had their slaves in the Bible, so we can have slaves, and that makes total sense, right? I mean, this is the kind of thing that we have to deal with, and that's why it's got to be discounted. You got to, whatever a person's faith is, if you're going to come to the table and talk about humanity and how we're going to self-govern, you got to leave it at the door, because everybody's going to have their own interpretation of a particular faith, or very much their own faith. Hell, some might just create it out of whole cloth. I mean, I'm not sure about Scientology, I don't know, man. But it seems like that was something a little more recent. Now, would you traditional, if you're a 1,000-year-old religion, would you think that Scientology is a real religion? Well, how would you like it if you don't, a particular religion that you perhaps believe is not a real religion, it's something just made up by man? Well, all of a sudden those folks get power and they start implementing and imposing their will upon you, other religious people. Probably wouldn't like that too much, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure wars, violence has been the cause of many of these things, right? Religion. So if you want to have a real conversation with real people that recognize that we all breathe air, we all bleed red. I mean, these are the basics, folks. I think it's important to, whatever your religious, ideological, and belief, you leave that at the door. And if you want to use that to influence your own personal behavior, knock yourself out. Not suggesting that you can't do that. But when we have, and when we see these articles and efforts from these white Christian nationalists, and what they want to do, what they want to impose, what they're trying to do here in this country, it's very scary. At least to me, to the non-believer, it's very scary. And I'm not gonna have time to get into a whole lot of it, but I'm just gonna throw this one out there because, again, folks, this is all related. It's all related, and it's hard. It's hard to address. It's hard to talk about it. Well, you're not supposed to talk about what? Sex, drugs, and rock. Well, you're not supposed to talk about religion at the dinner table. You're not supposed to talk about politics at the dinner table. Well, really? What are we talking about? I mean, I love sports as much as anybody else, and the weather's the weather. But these are the fundamental, basic thoughts and conversations of our time, and we're taught, quote unquote, we're supposed to address these very gingerly, and certainly not at the dinner table. Well, yes, at the dinner table with people that you trust and people that you're dining with. When you're eating together, there's something to be said. I know the Italians, we love to go eat together. it brings people together. Food. I worship food. Drink, food and drink. Let's worship those things. That's what brings us together. Doesn't divide us. But quickly, Trump allies prepared to infuse Christian nationalism in a second administration. Spearheading the effort is Russell Vought, the president of the Center for Renewing America, part of a conservative consortium preparing for Trump's return to power. Oh, man, I can't wait. We'll get into it, but let's take some calls first. I want people waiting. 844-967-2789. Cindy from Appleton, you are up. Welcome, Cindy. What do you got for us? Hello, Cindy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you. Yeah, I just wanted to say quickly, and I didn't get the whole conversation, but I think I got the gist of it, where the Christians now want to control sperm and make sperm a human, blah, blah, blah. And, I'm just thinking, now that it's affecting men, now that the right wing is going to start telling men what they can and can't do with their bodies, then I think things are going to really change, because I just think, where were men with the abortion issue? Because didn't they think they might be the next ones on the chopping block?
You would think, but at this point, Cindy, as long as men cannot give birth, if men could give birth, Cindy, this wouldn't even be an issue. You know what I mean? I don't believe it for a minute. It's their, and again, it's their religious beliefs, because it's not a medical belief behind this. This is all a religious belief being imposed upon other people, and I just, I struggle with it, Cindy, because I understand people that don't want to have an abortion. It's a terrible thing, and I would agree. I think, man, anyone who's had an abortion, Cindy, if a woman has been through that, it's got to be a tough decision to make, no doubt, and it sticks with you throughout your entire life. I'm sure of it. But that's up for the woman to decide. It's not up for a man in Madison or in Washington, D.C. to decide what you, Cindy, need to do with your body based on their own personal, private, religious beliefs.
Absolutely.
Right on, Cindy. Thank you for the call. Karina, we'll get you in. You got 45 seconds, Karina. What do you got for us?
I want to say hi, and I want to say the key word is belief. This is the key word. Belief. This is not a fact. You cannot rule government and produce laws on the base of a belief.
Amen, sister. Love it. Thanks for calling, Karina. Have a great weekend. Folks, we are the Devil's Advocates, the Happy Hour coming up next. James Santel, former U.S. attorney, going to join us and get into the weeds on all the shenanigans with the Trump cases and the impeachments, yada, yada. You know the deal. Jim is up next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Randall Stadium, or just hanging out at the farmer's market. This is Mad Radio 92.7.
Jim, can you hear me there?
Yes, Nate, I can. Can you hear me also?
Yes, I can hear you there. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Always appreciate it.
Absolutely delighted once again, and ready to roll here whenever you and your colleague there are set to go.
Yeah. Let's see here. Your levels are looking good there.
Okay.
Do you happen to have a fan on in the background by chance? I hear like a slight hiss or something.
I do not, but I've got just a couple minutes. Let me just check downstairs to see what's going on here, but let me just do that and make certain everything is off, and I'll be right back.
Sure. It might just be your mic there a little bit. It's not that bad. We should be okay. So.
All right. Let me just check. Let me just make certain that there's no one's broken into I don't know, use the Vegematic or something like that, right?
Sure.
I'll be right back.
And while you're out, think of a song that you'd like to end the segment with.
Okay.
We have
All
room
right,
for
very good.
one.
We'll do that. Great.
We have one Santel song, and I'll be right back.
Federal government wants to know why this happened. DHS and the FBI are looking into this as well, working with the tech industry, these network providers. National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby, the system that handles 911 calls was affected by the outages.
Brian Clark, ABC News.
New concerns over in vitro fertilization in Alabama. 3 IVF providers have now paused treatments. That after the state's Supreme Court ruled that frozen embryos are legally children. President Biden met privately in San Francisco with the wife and daughter of Alexei Navalny. The Russian opposition leader died at a Russian prison camp. The president blames Russia's leader for his death and will sign off on new sanctions tomorrow. This is ABC News.
Civic Media News, I'm Terry Bell. Here's what Wisconsin needs to know. Today is the last day at work for the Wisconsin legislature. A busy assembly floor session today includes a constitutional amendment to keep houses of worship open during public health emergencies. Several other bills are part of the deal Republicans struck with Universities of Wisconsin officials, including money for new buildings. More Wisconsin farmers are taking the government up on incentives to try more sustainable practices. Mike Lavender is with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. He says that was even before the USDA provided more incentives.
So while this is, of course, accurate and really important to wrap our heads around, there's even newer data that we're getting from Inflation Reduction Act funding demand that it's important to take into account.
The Inflation Reduction Act provides nearly $20 billion for popular conservation programs. I'm Terry Bell, Civic Media News. Now here's what you need to know closer to home.
For WMDX News, I'm Nate Wiggyhout. More and more kids are missing school throughout Dane County schools since the beginning of the COVID pandemic.
All right, I'm back there. Jim, do you have a song suggestion for first segment?
Sure, let's do. I had lunch today with Melissa Temple, who's the teacher who was fired in Waukesha.
I know Melissa.
So let's do Can We Find Rainbow Land by Miley Cyrus and who's her
Dolly.
Dolly, of course, Dolly Parton, right? Everybody was thinking, wait, wasn't yeah, can we do that? Can we find that?
Yeah, I should be able to get that for you. Otherwise, we got about 3 minutes till the next segment, so I'll go quiet on the mics, and we'll be back in a few.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nate.
News.
Hey, Darcy, I just saw the perfect house. Can you help me write an offer on it?
I'd be happy to, Brian. Did you see it at an open house?
No, I just called the sign and had the agent show it to me. I didn't want to bug you.
Right. How many times have you heard me say don't call the sign?
All of them.
You called the agent working for the seller, and once you see the property with that agent, I'm no longer free to write an offer on it.
So...
You need to hire us from the beginning, help you find the right home, negotiate on your behalf, and protect your interests all the way through the process, and it shouldn't cost you a dime.
Solidarity Realty. They're real, they're solid, and they're honest. Find them at solidarityrealty.com.
The Sheriff is back. Hi, I'm Mike Clemens with sports. The Sheriff, pitcher Brandon Woodruff, signed a 2-year deal to return to the Brewers. Was his agent receiving offers from other teams?
Yes, there was quite a few teams that were in it to the end, and yeah, I was close to signing there at the end, and then the Brewers came in right at the last second. It's kind of how it happened, but yeah, I mean there was interest from a lot of other clubs.
College basketball, number 7th ranked Marquette defeating DePaul by 34 points, 105-71. Tyler Kolek setting a new Marquette record with 18 assists, surpassing Tony Miller and Doc Rivers.
That's just the nature of our team is to really share the ball and get each other involved. We cut, we pass, we move, just to show our team as a whole, as a collective, is always unselfish.
Head coach Shaka Smart.
I mean, you could tell by watching Tyler play tonight. And, up there, Tony Miller, 17, Doc Rivers, 16. Those are guys that have been in the record books for a long, long time.
That's Marquette head coach Shaka Smart. With sports, I'm Mike Clemens.
I'm meteorologist Brittany Merlot. Another sunny and spring-like day today as highs climb to the mid and upper 50s. Winds become breezy tonight as a cold front smacks us tomorrow, sparking a few flurries to fly around, with around a trace to about a half an inch possible to accumulate, and highs remaining much cooler. Currently, it's 58.
Hey, Dom, how many palindromes can you name in 30 seconds?
Race car, mom, dad, reefer, kayak, level. Did I say mom already?
You're forgetting one really important one.
Zero res.
Not only is it the coolest palindrome ever, it's also our favorite.
Right, I remember. Why is that again?
They advertise with us.
Zero res, my favorite palindrome.
And carpet cleaner.
And carpet cleaner.
Get the best carpet cleaning ever. Schedule your carpet cleaning online at zeroresmedicine.com. Tell them the Devil's Advocate sent you.
Hey everybody, it's Todd Albaugh. Friday noon to 3, we have Brady Ewing on talking sports and also more live from Hayward at the Birkenbinder right here on the Civic Media Radio Network.
There's nothing better than the violet soup. The Devil's Advocates radio show is broadcast under a time brokerage agreement between Devil Radio and Civic Media Inc. Some portions of this program may be pre-recorded. Warning, you're about to listen to the greatest radio show ever, and due to contractual obligations and to shield our airwaves and corporate licensees from any semblance of liability, responsibility, and gullibility, we must tell you the views represented on this show are not necessarily those of this station or its management. This radio show contains differing points of view on current political topics, and due to the nature of its contents, it should be heard by everyone. Thank you for listening. Now live from the Civic Media Studios in Madison, Wisconsin, where the political party is just beginning, welcome to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Friends proving it's never personal, only politics.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
And now, here's your hosts, Dom and Crute.
Welcome to the Devil's Advocates radio show. I am your host, Dominic Salvia. Crute is out until tomorrow. He promises to be back in the studios with his unique perspective on things. Look forward to Crute coming back. In the meantime, our pal James Santel, he's the former U.S. attorney and host of his own show here on the Civic Media Network. Jim, thanks for joining us, man. Always a pleasure.
Dom, delighted to be with you once again. When Crute is away, we've got more time to talk between ourselves, right?
Yeah, right. I say it all the time, man. It's hard to get a word in edgewise. Jim, you had sent a text out to me the other day, a Newsweek article, specifically, Supreme Court's silence, quote unquote, is good for Donald Trump. Now, this is what the I have absolute immunity to get SEAL Team 6 to murder everybody I don't like defense. Certainly that's going to be rejected. I can't imagine a world in which it would not, but he still gets the benefit of delay, does he not, Jim?
He does, and so you've got it just right. The notion that even this Supreme Court would say that a president is immune from prosecution for the things that he or one day she does in a criminal nature, that is so dangerous and so scary as to be completely untenable. So we know the result of this. The question, as you just indicated, is when does this come out? Donald Trump, in the wake of the D.C. Court of Appeals finding against him a week ago Monday, filed this petition for review by the Supreme Court. So we're coming up now, Dom, on 10 days, coming up almost on 2 weeks since the Supreme Court has had it. Now, they did solicit from Jack Smith a response to whether or not they should take this case at all. Interestingly, Jack Smith did not wait the 5 days he had. He filed it 48 hours later saying, Supreme Court, let's move on this. And again, it is sitting there right now. Hopefully, sometime very soon, we'll get some word from the Supreme Court. But to your good point, the longer they take, whether they decide now not to take the case at all, probably they will decide to take it maybe on an expedited basis, even worse, on a non-expedited basis. Every day that they wait in determining whether even to hear the case is a date that delays that fundamental criminal prosecution pending in D.C. about the insurrection, about election interference. This is what Mike, if he were here, were to say is most important case pending. And I think you and I would both agree every day that this waits unaddressed by the Supreme Court is a day that postpones it. Why is that important? Because if Tanya Chutkan cannot find the time, and we're talking weeks, maybe a couple months in her docket to put this back on the calendar. Remember, it was scheduled to begin in a couple of weeks. It's no longer on her calendar. She can't find that time in the next several months. It's entirely possible now this could be tried after the election. Now, that's maybe less likely than more. But every day that we wait on a decision by the Supreme Court, again, to decide whether or not to take the case is a date in which justice is delayed. We've talked before, you and I, about this notion that there are those folks out there. There's apparently significant numbers polling telling us that if Donald Trump is convicted of a crime, which is what this case is all about, that would change their vote. And so, again, that's the reason. That's the political side of things. On the legal justice side of things, this case needs to move ahead. Supreme Court needs to tell us promptly what they're doing with this. As we said before, you and I, they need to simply say, you know what, the Court of Appeals got it right, the lower court got it right. Nothing to see here, nothing to look at. Go ahead, Tanya, schedule this on for the trial and do that expeditiously.
And in that regard, Jim, the appeals court, the lower court ruling on that, anything there that would cause you any concern whatsoever? I mean, they took their time as well to what I think lay down a very airtight case for the U.S. Supreme Court not to take it up. Was there anything there that gave you pause for concern?
Nothing whatsoever. We've got actually both Tanya Chutkan's very compelling 56-page order. We've got a similarly large decision by the appeals court, all of it to the same end. We're sort of running out of ways in which to say presidents aren't kings and the republic is going to stand only when the rule of law is enforced across the board for everybody, including somebody happening to sit in the Oval Office. The language is clear. It's compelling. If any of your listeners have any doubt about that, pull that up online, read portions of it. You have unanimity right now. You've got the lower court judge. You've got those three judges in the circuit court saying, no question here, this is not a close question. And based upon that, again, the Supreme Court can look at this and say, you know what, we're simply going to put our stamp on this by saying, Donald, you've already gotten your justice. There's nothing to reconcile here, nothing to resolve in terms of disputes between the circuits, no unknown area of the law. All those kinds of things are things that the Supreme Court identifies as a basis to take cases. As you and I discussed before, the only reason for them to do it right now is if you've got Supreme Court justices who say, this is a moment in history, I want to be heard. I want to be the one to write yet another opinion that says the same thing. And for our grandchildren down the road, want to be able to have them read this in their social studies classes, history classes. This may be a legacy piece, but it's also practically, again, affecting the expeditious administration of justice in America.
How long does it take to write ditto? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
All right. So James Santel, former U.S. attorney, friend of ours, host on the Civic Media Network. Jim, I assume I'm feeling good these days, that a Supreme Court ruling will be imminent, or at least a decision. And I think they won't take the case. Let's say they decide not to take the case still this month, right? We got another 7 days. It's a leap year, Jim. We got till the 29th. If they, between now and the end of the month, decide not to take the case, how does that impact the timeline? I know Judge Chutkan had talked about a vacation I think she had scheduled. If she has other cases, can she move them around? I mean, if the Supreme Court says by March 1, no, we're not taking it, how does that affect the timeline to your understanding?
Sure. So let's assume I'll give them even one more day. I'll be even more gracious than you are. I'll give them until Friday, March 1, right, to issue this decision. I'll come back on your show if you invite me, and we can talk about that day. Quite literally, when the opinion is issued, obviously it goes back to the Court of Appeals, and it's affirming or simply refusing to review the Court of Appeals decision. And plainly, the Court of Appeals then instantaneously also tells the lower court, yes, that's the law of this case. Tanya Chutkan, if she wanted to, whether it's on March 1 or the 4th right after that, she can then schedule this on as she likes. Chances are, given the fact that she has taken this off the calendar, she could schedule very promptly what's called a status hearing, a pretrial conference with the parties, and say, okay, it's back. This issue is resolved. Nobody is going to fight about this anymore. I'm looking at my calendar. Gentlemen, gentleladies, bring your calendars to the courtroom, and we're going to put this on. She does have other cases. Federal district judges, federal appeals court judges, especially federal district judges, have latitude. She does have other cases, but she could say, you know what? I am going to find that maybe some of the civil cases that do not have the speedy trial issues that this might, I can find perhaps that some of the other criminal cases, I can move those around somewhat. She's the ultimate decision maker. There's nobody to review that. And so she could put this on fairly expeditiously. She's got to be mindful, however, of all those other litigants out there who've been waiting and maybe are planning to go to trial on March 20th or something. And she's thoughtful about that as well. But she could indeed, again, if the Supreme Court acts quickly, she could still put this on. Again, the timing of this is not a 2 or 3 day felon in possession case or a small false statements case. She also needs to find a large chunk of time. I would offer she probably needs to find about a couple of months to do this by the time you do jury selection, prosecution case, defense case, jury deliberation. She could divide it up a little bit. She could suspend for, say, a week and do other matters. That's all within her discretion, too. There is a non-frivolous way in which she can get this done fairly quickly. But again, it depends a bit on her schedule. And we are still waiting on the 9 people on Capitol Hill to tell us what it is she can and cannot do.
James Santel, former U.S. attorney. In the meantime, Jim, Alvin Bragg, he's laid it down March 25th. So whatever happens with the Supreme Court, whatever happens with Judge Chutkin, it appears they're going to have to work around the March 25th Alvin Bragg case. Jim, do you think that's going to go off on time? And what's the timeline, your expectation for how long that particular trial would take?
Sure. So this, again, we're now out of the federal system. We're in the state system, as you just indicated, Dom. We're back in Manhattan. We've been there before. This is case pending before a fellow named Juan Merchan, Merchan. He has presided over previous trials involving the Trump organization, so he knows them well. Much to Donald Trump's dismay, he's back in front of the judge once again. This is the so-called hush money, the catch and kill case. And again, as you indicated, Alvin Bragg saying, you know what? If nobody else is going to use this time period, let's sneak this one in. Interestingly, we know from Judge Merchan himself that he picked up the phone and he called Tanya Chutkin and said, hey, Tanya, are you going ahead? And she said, I've heard nothing. So he said, yeah, let's affirm this March 25th date. The expectation there from the prosecuting attorney, the DA, Alvin Bragg, again, weeks of trial, including jury selection. It now looks more and more likely that will happen, and that we'll be spending much of April and May hearing about that particular case, not without its intellectual academic aspects in terms of the way that it's charged, but we're going to get Michael Cohen back on the stand. Looking forward to that, as always. We're going to hear more about checks being written to quiet and silence porn stars. Glad to be in America these days, aren't we all? And with the risk of sounding a little bit superficial about all this, people say this is not an important case. I would say it is. This is in many ways Donald Trump's origin story, right? This happens right before the election. It is related to election interference because what is he doing? He's saying, be quiet, catch this story, kill it, so the American people don't know about it. It's not only his origin story, but it also relates to election interference. So it's not simply a porn star hush money case. It's more than that. And that's the reason why I think it is significant. Absolutely.
Folks, you're listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. I'm Dom. That's James Santel. He's our friend, former U.S. attorney. He's going to stick around. We got lots and lots to talk about. I'm a little concerned about the timeline you just laid out there. If Bragg starts, jury selection on the 25th, he said something about May. Jim, that seems a little longer than a couple of weeks, but hold on that and come back with us. More Devil's Advocates on the other side. We will be right back.
Together we can start living in a rainbow land.
Hey, Molly. I know it sounds scrambled.
Partner now with the greatest radio show ever and start getting return on your investment immediately. The Devil's Advocates are a small business just like you, and like you, we can't afford advertising that offers no return. The Devil's Advocates listeners support our sponsors and the mission. They'll tell you when your messages are working and put cash in your register. So invest your ad dollars to reach our raving Madison and Dane County fans, or affordably reach the whole state, Chicago, Minneapolis, and our nationwide stream audience today. The Devil's Advocates can be the voice of your business, hold special events at your location, interview your staff for satisfied customers to lift your business. Contact us today, Crute at darnwy.com. That's Crute at darnwy.com.
Do you ever get tired of one-sided conversations filled with mean-spirited rhetoric? It's time to listen and engage. Join the Rational Revolution with me, Chris Alfine, Saturday afternoons at 2 and Sunday afternoons at 1 on Mad Radio.
The Devil's Advocates. Political commentary from the back of the class.
Devil's Advocates radio show. James Santel, former U.S. attorney, friend of ours, host of the Civic Media Network here on the Saturdays. Jim, thank you for sticking around. We got one more segment, maybe two. We'll see what happens. There's a lot to get through. And I have so very many questions, Jim. Always appreciate when you come around and hang out with us. The Alvin Bragg, starting the Trump case, the hush money case, more than just having sex with a porn star. I'm with you, man. This is the origin story. This goes to the beginning of the malfeasance of Donald Trump, the criming, as it were, in his election interference by not allowing this information to come forward, by paying off the people to keep their mouths shut. He deprived the voting public of information that may have changed some of their minds, and I would imagine probably would, especially coming off the heels of the Hollywood Access tape.
Yes.
But that being said, Jim, Alvin Bragg's scheduled to start, I believe, Monday, March 25th. So that's what, to start getting a jury selection, right? So you mentioned goes through March and April, maybe into May. Well, May gets to be a little long, Jim. What's the timeline, realistic timeline, in your opinion, on this case?
Sure. Again, it certainly isn't as long as some of the other trials because, again, the facts are a bit more discreet, right? You've got to have these communications between Donald Trump, Michael Cohen. You've got to introduce the evidence related to communications. We've got checks in this case. We've seen them. Right. We've talked about them on this broadcast, signed by Donald and at least one of his sons. Michael Cohen is a key witness. Thankfully, he's not the only witness. If that would be the case, I'd be very concerned about the legitimacy of going forward here.
Is David Becker from National, the Enquirer, would he be called as well? And could Weisselberg, the CFO, could he be called as well?
Absolutely right. Weisselberg has been a frequent visitor to the courts these days, is he not? In all these cases, right? He is the CFO. He's also suffered a felony conviction of his own. There's lots of problems, lots of baggage there. But again, he is somebody who can describe inside the Trump organization the financial piece of this. And you've got all these folks coming forward describing this event and even statements, perhaps, again, Donald Trump doesn't use email, as we know, but things that Donald Trump may have said to Michael Cohen and to other people about the reasons for reimbursing Michael Cohen, purportedly for legal services. Michael Cohen comes and says, no, that wasn't it. I was being reimbursed for the payments that I previously made to these two. And so the transaction itself is not huge, but it does take some time to prove it. You want to corroborate the statements by these, again, baggage-filled witnesses, if you will, who have problems of credibility on their own. They're inside the Trump organization. They're the ones who know. And of course, Donald Trump has no obligation to testify, but if there is indeed a defense case, maybe he's got some other people, as he did in the recent valuations case before Judge Engoron in New York. He brings some people forward to say, well, wait a minute, no, there were some financial legal transactions that we're paying for. So he can make his defense, no obligation to do so under our Constitution, but all that takes time. And you can certainly imagine in recent cases, we've got a lot of back and forth. Donald Trump does not keep his mouth shut, as he should during the course of proceedings. We've got a lot of things, a lot of sidebars, a lot of things to take care of along the way, just by virtue of the way that his own attorneys defend him. They've got a right to do all those kinds of things. All of that takes time. As I add this up, I could very easily see it going sometime into May. Maybe not long into May, but 8 weeks or so with, again, after jury instruction, entirely possible. And then you've got to add on jury deliberation as well. You could get a jury that, like the E. Jean Carroll matter, comes back in a matter of hours and says, not a lot to look at here, and we'll fine you basically $83 million. Or you could have jurors who would be very conscientious also, who want to go through everything, and that will take some time as well. So this is not a several-day trial. I don't think it's just a several-week trial. Somewhere between several and many weeks, again, even in the Manhattan trial court there.
Interesting. Okay. So you mentioned the Engoron, the fraud case.
Yes.
The judge in his ruling made some comment about Michael Cohen
Yes.
telling the truth. Does that reinforcement of a witness who has his own baggage, who pled guilty before to perjury, whatever the case may be, does that help in these other cases? I mean, do those kind of things roll over into this state Manhattan case?
Right. The answer, listeners may not be pleased to hear this, is for the most part, no. That a finding by another judge, especially in a civil case, unrelated, mostly, not completely, to this case, you can't introduce Judge Engoron's decision to bolster the credibility of a witness in this other matter. So as much as the inclination, mine, yours, everyone, is to say, well, wait a minute, there's already been a judicial determination this guy is fairly credible. The answer is a pure evidentiary matter. It's actually hearsay if you think about it, another judge making those findings. And so that doesn't come in, but there are things that they're going to want to address. Michael Cohen has written books. He's appeared on a lot of talk shows and plainly had before Congress as well, and has suffered these criminal convictions. And so one of the things you need to do is to stand up in front of the jury. This is Alvin Bragg, and say, you know what? You don't have to like Michael Cohen. You might even dislike him affirmatively. You might think that this is a man who has got a lot of baggage, and you're right to think that. But think about what he is saying, and then look at all the corroborating information we're providing. Look at the transactions. Look at the documents. They all make sense. Michael Cohen provides the cement, but you got to kind of distance yourself at the same time. You don't want the jury to think that my case depends entirely upon your embracing this fellow. You've got to have an arm's length relationship with him, but also, and that's exactly as you just said, what Judge Engoron said, I don't have to like him, but his statements in the valuations case are credible. Why? Because he is telling the truth, and he was right there, and he had a front row seat in the room, to use the Hamilton reference. He knows what he's talking about. Those are the kinds of things that you can describe to a jury in closing argument to get the jury to say, I believe him, even though I do not want to bring him home for dinner tonight or introduce him to my family.
Or date my daughter. James Santel, former U.S. attorney. Regarding the Alvin Bragg case, any chance that the recipient of these money, Stephanie Clifford, Stormy Daniels, as she's known by, and the other lady, I forget her name, the Playboy Bunny, any chance that they come up and testify and tell their story?
Sure, absolutely. And I have not looked at the docket. I should do that in time for our next discussion here. But almost certainly, as a good prosecutor, you have to produce witness lists in advance of trial, pretrial conferences. I'm quite certain that Alvin Bragg has listed them and probably has subpoenas out for them to appear by virtue of, again, that piece of it. The decision will be made, again, as they put this all together. If their testimony is needed, if it's critical, it may well be, if it does, again, offer some further cement to this overall story. The recipients of this money, again, as you said, the David Pecker portion, all these people are unsavory, and that's the problem. And at some point, you also think about the strategy you are presenting to the jury. Jury will begin to look around and say, gee, D.A. Bragg, is there anybody who's a banker, a broadcaster, a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, whose credibility is this entire case based upon one person who's less credible than the next? So you want to measure that at some point and say, do we really need their testimony? I suspect he certainly will think about it as the case goes on. If you've got other witnesses, including Michael Cohen, if he's compelling, maybe you don't in the end. But that could be a judgment call that you make even during the course of the trial itself. But I'm sure they're on a witness list right now.
Wow. James Santel, I'm going to make a judgment call. You want to stick around for another segment? We got these other cases to talk about. And I mean, you're a former U.S. attorney, right? You've talked to witnesses under oath, right? In your okay. I want to get your sense on this guy who apparently gave some false testimony regarding the Hunter Joe Biden thing.
Yes.
Folks, we are the Devil's Advocates. A lot more to get into. Stick around. James Santel coming around for another segment. Thank you, Jim. We'll be right back.
Continuing on talking sports and also more live from Hayward at the Birkenbeiner right here on the Civic Media Radio Network.
Civic Media News. I'm Terry Bell. Here's what Wisconsin needs to know. Wisconsin will get $24 million from cigarette makers. That's for payments the companies missed between 2005 and 2007 stemming from another legal case. The money is going to the Wisconsin Medical Assistance Trust Fund. People with student loan debt can get their payments cut or even completely forgiven thanks to a Department of Education program. Cora Hume is with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She says older borrowers can take advantage if they consolidate balances that don't qualify.
The commercially managed federally family education loans, the health and education assistance loans, and Perkins loans. Another loan that sort of is a quasi need for consolidation are Parent Plus loans.
Hume recommends acting sooner rather than later. I'm Terry Bell, Civic Media News. Now here's what you need to know closer to home.
For WMDX News, I'm Nate Weggehout. The Janesville City Council will consider the next step in redeveloping the former General Motors campus at their meeting Monday night. The plant was demolished in 2018. Janesville officials say that it's time to rebuild their legacy and find a new way to use the property. They say that they can begin assessing new funding sources and building a vision for what they want to see at the site. City officials anticipate planning for the campus area will be completed in the next 18 months. The Dane County Sheriff's Office is gearing up for summer and will be offering a boater safety class this spring. The two-day class is being offered in partnership with the State Department of Natural Resources and begins on April 6th. Boaters can learn the laws and ethics of using a boat on Wisconsin waters, as well as safety tips and how to properly use a boat. The class costs $10. And that's what you need to know. I'm Nate Weggehout, WMDX News.
Hi, I'm Mike Crute, and I've signed my share of commercial real estate leases. In Madison, I highly recommend Jeff Jansen from Altus Commercial Real Estate. Jeff guided me to my first radio station location on the west side. He helped us move to University Ave, and eventually Jeff set up the lease on the Civic Media World headquarters. No one works harder to provide options in commercial leasing. Call Jeff Jansen and his team at Altus Commercial Real Estate at 608-338-1101.
Beat with the 60-second Showbiz Beat. Is Jimmy Kimmel Live coming to an end? The host of the show, Jimmy Kimmel, ironically enough, alluded to a possible end in sight. The New York Post reports Kimmel believes this could be his final contract for the late-night talk show. The 56-year-old host's current contract ends in 2 years, and Kimmel says that might be enough. Kimmel is set to host this year's Oscars on March 10th. It's time for one of Pete's reluctant picks. Yes, reluctant. True Detective Night Country, the 4th season of the show, overall is a good watch. The show is set in the ominous and creepy setting of Alaska during 24 hours of darkness. The filmmakers blend the supernatural with good performances from the cast, which includes Jodie Foster. Warning, do not space out for a minute, or you will have to go back and watch the entire thing again. Don't you hate when shows challenge you to the point where you can't play video poker on your phone and follow the plot at the same time? For more showbiz fun, tune in to Nightlight with me, Pete Schwaba, every night between 7 and 9 p.m. on the Civic Media Radio Network.
I'm meteorologist Mace Michaels. Partly cloudy tonight, a low around 30. Mostly cloudy for tomorrow, maybe a sprinkle or flurry, high in the upper 30s. Sun's back for Saturday, 40 and breezy. Upper 40s Sunday, with lots of sunshine. The warmth and dry weather continues into next week. Currently 57 degrees.
At Chance Design Build, we provide remodeling done well with love. Our commitments extend beyond our workplace and your home to support our community. We judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin, and we believe all humans deserve quality, publicly funded education, childcare, and health care. But what do you believe in? At Chance Design Build, we believe every person must have the opportunity to thrive. If you're thinking about remodeling your home, go to chancedesignbuild.com to learn more about our commitments to you, your home, and our community.
Your home for the Devil's Advocates with Dom and Crute. Weekday afternoons from 4 until 6.
I like your stories and your reporting. Great show.
Charged, never convicted. The Devil's Advocates.
And thank you for listening to the Devil's Advocates radio show. Super happy that James Santel, former U.S. Attorney, friend of ours, host on the Civic Media Network, he's sticking around for one more segment, Jim. Always appreciate it, man. You know, if Donald Trump did a little less criming, we wouldn't have all this time to hang out. So I'm thankful for that.
What would we talk about? Well, we find something we know we'd talk about, but it wouldn't be this. And we wouldn't have 17 things on our agenda every time we get together, right?
Well, I appreciate your patience with me. All right, so we got through a couple of these cases. But I want to touch on the Engoron judgment for just a moment. My understanding from some of the reporting I saw overnight, Trump's team was trying to delay for 30 days, payment because they didn't like the way that the AG wrote her document. Jim, what? And the judge ultimately said no. So is this just more, delay attempts by Team Trump?
It is. And again, you pull out all the stops, and plainly he's paying or maybe not paying for his lawyers to do all of these kinds of things. This is what you do, motions for reconsideration, for rehearing. He does have this time period. Interestingly, in response to this, Letitia James, who brought this case, this civil case, has said, not only do I object to any extension of that time period, but oh, by the way, I may be going after some of his real estate. She talked about how I look right across the street there in Foley Square and I see some of his property and I think, gee, we can, and she does have what are called supplemental proceedings. You can seize some properties here to do that. Now, the other thing that he can do, and the reason why this is very interesting, is he can also file a bond. Basically, he can go to a bonding company, a bank, and say, listen, I'm now on the hook for upwards of $455 million and counting. Can you basically secure that amount? You've got to place some collateral, post some collateral to support that. And I'm wondering if he's having difficulty doing that. And that's what also prompts this interest in postponing his deadline date. He plainly has told the world before that he's got somewhere around $400 million in cash. Certainly between all these things, that kind of depletes all of that if he pays all of it out. He's also got E. Jean Carroll out there with something closing in on $90 million. He's got a lot of debt out there, but these are also somewhat reflections, not only to delay things, but also an indication that they may be squeezing him a bit, and that the delays are meant because he may be having some problem, again, going down this other road, which is to secure the bond, finding somebody who will support that and permitting him to get on with his life. We don't know, and we maybe shouldn't know. That's a part of his attorney-client relationship there. But it's certainly, you've got a attorney general here who is not having any of it. And again, Judge Engoron plainly saying, nope, that's what you've got to do.
But we also,
yeah.
Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we also have, there's a monitor, right? There's a monitor assigned to watch over the Trump organization. And essentially anything he does, wouldn't the monitor have to approve? I believe it was anything over $5 million. I mean, so this is going to be transparent, at least to those that have the right to know, to see what's going on. I mean, the government will know what Donald Trump does to raise this money. Yes.
Absolutely. And so this has also been a thorn in the side of the Trump family, Donald Trump family. He is, I hate to use the word, despising this procedure, but they've never liked the fact that this monitor is in place. Judge Engoron, in his recent order, not only affirmed what she has done already, but re-upped her and said, you're going to continue to do this. He has plainly suspended the capacity of Donald Trump and the Sons from operating in this area for at least several years. During that time, maybe beyond, she is going to be monitoring all of this. So absolutely, if there are any sales of property, if there are any monetary transactions that are happening, she is going to see them. And of course, the idea behind a monitor is you can report to the judge and indicate, hey, we've got some movement here. Some of it may not be, all of it may be completely legal. He is liquidating properties to pay off a judgment. That's entirely appropriate. But if there's anything else that's beyond the pale, she would also come forward and say, this is my responsibility, and I'm identifying this as being a problem. Again, Donald Trump has very, very much disliked this, and it's one of those features of this order that they're certainly going to be appealing. That is this need for continuing oversight by someone who's quite literally looking over their shoulder day after day after day and saying, nope, not that transaction, this one, and approving or not approving the things that they're doing.
So she has the actual right to approve a certain dollar amount. They need her approval to facilitate in some of these cases, correct? Based on the dollar amount.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And probably here, understanding that this particular transaction would be legitimate, she may well say, sure, if you want to do this, she's not responsible for the overall livelihood of the company. She's responsible for ensuring that it's being operated in a way that's consistent with the law. She's not there to ensure that it's privately held, but that the people out there are going to see a Trump corporation that's vibrant and alive. That's not her interest. She's interested in making sure the law is complied with.
James Santel, former U.S. attorney, friend of ours. All right, before we move on to the secret documents hoarding case in Florida, I just want to circle back briefly to the cases that we know. So we have a civil case, 300 some throw interest on their 400 some $1 million, and Goron has ruled. You tack on the E. Jean Carroll, we're talking another 80 some, we're talking over $500 million. And I saw Forbes or Fortune, somebody said, Donald Trump's got a net worth of like 2.6, less than $3 billion. I mean, that's a big chunk for anybody. As a percentage, regardless of what it is, that's a big percentage of your money or your assets that you're going to have to come up with. But I'm going to briefly touch on the timing thing. We talked about the Alvin Bragg, March 25th is when that starts. And let's say, okay, it goes through March, the last week of March, all of April, and most of May. So that leaves open perhaps like June 3rd, Monday, June 3rd. Could, based on that, and assuming we get something back from the U.S. Supreme Court regarding Trump's frivolous assertion that he has absolute immunity to murder people, that comes down between now and then. Could Chutkan potentially schedule something for June? And if so, here's the other part. Of course, the RNC in the great state of Wisconsin and Milwaukee, July 15th through the 18th, presumably, if Chutkan got going in June, that case would not be done by the time the RNC comes to Milwaukee.
Absolutely. That's one of the very plausible scenarios in all this. And again, if I'm quite certain that Judge Merchan and Judge Chutkan will still talk, and assuming that the Supreme Court tells us what they're doing with immunity, sometime while the hush money case is going, she is not going to schedule something where Donald Trump also has to be there. By the way, an important point, unlike civil cases where you can come and go, criminal cases, you need to be present in the courtroom. And that's what he is complaining about bitterly. But she could well schedule something to begin in mid-June, goes into July, when again, here in Milwaukee, in the state of Wisconsin, we've got the Republicans here. How fascinating that would be, that he is obliged to be in a courtroom in the District of Columbia during the day and then flies into Mitchell International Airport late afternoon, early evening, presumably maybe on his private jet, and makes his way downtown to the Fiserv Forum and appears there to give his acceptance speech for the nomination. That is not a crazy scenario that could happen here. And again, all of that, depending upon what happens judicially, highly likely. As to the inventory that you're taking, those two are the ones that are really on the top of the list. Yep. It's fairly clear that the so-called documents case, that's the Eileen Cannon matter in Florida, that's not going to bump up this in any time soon. And then, of course, you've got the Georgia case, this omnibus case, or the RICO prosecution. Unlikely, again, that that's going to intrude much, if at all, before the election. So these are the two that could happen before November comes around. And the timing of this, anticipate, too, that if the scenario that you've just laid out does happen, there'll be motions filed in front of Judge Chutkan, probably attempts to do interlocutory appeals to the Court of Appeals to say, wait a minute, I'm a candidate for the presidency. I need to be out there campaigning, and these federal judges and state judges, Judge Merchan, are requiring me to be in court. And again, the judges up to now, including both of them, has said, I will give you some latitude, but you are a defendant in my courtroom. I'm going to treat you as I would anybody else. The speculation then is this is what he would do in addition to getting on flights flying back and forth between Milwaukee and D.C. or even Milwaukee and New York, if that should go on that long, is that he'll be holding little campaign rallies outside the federal courthouse, right, in the District of Columbia there on Pennsylvania Avenue, or outside in Manhattan, and you're doing campaigning in breaks during the course of the trial. We use the word unprecedented way too much, but again, it applies here. We haven't seen this before. And again, Donald Trump is not at all above doing that, moving outside and doing that campaigning there on site.
James Santel, former U.S. attorney, regarding the Georgia case, we saw Bonnie Willis on the witness stand. I mean, this is how things have turned. But she I thought, number one, to go after a black woman like this, they're not going after anybody else. They're going after her. I mean, so I want to note that. I thought she did a great job defending herself and laying out the scenario. But what about the timing of the judge coming back to decide whether or not, DA Willis can continue the RICO case? What's your thought on the timeline there?
Right. This is Scott McAfee, is the state court judge once again, as we keep all these judges under our understanding. And he again entertains this 2-day evidentiary hearing. This may be not quite as frivolous as the immunity issue, but I'd put it pretty much in the same category of nothing to see there. Under Georgia law, a little bit of civics here, as we always do, Dom. In order to disqualify someone, you've got to have one of two things in Georgia law. You've got to have some forensic interference. That is, I'm mocking up documents. I'm interfering with witnesses. I'm doing something to muck up the evidence. That is not here. Or you can have a conflict of interest, and this is one that we've talked about before. Identify for me the conflict of interest. And I know they're alleging all these things related to financial goings on, and her former now romantic boyfriend there, who's also inside the office. None of that sets up a conflict of interest in her capacity to prosecute the separate criminal case against Donald Trump. And so I will predict here once again, I will take you and Nate and even Mike out to dinner on this. The judge will come back, apply Georgia law, and find that there's no there. She is not disqualified. And so this falls once again in the category of look what we did. However, Donald Trump, as you and I have discussed in the past, for those 2 days at least, he was winning, right? Look what he did in this situation. An unfounded basis upon which to attack that prosecution. We're not talking about Donald Trump. We're talking about the DA and what an incredible thing he accomplished. I'm not happy about this. He's got the district attorney on the stand. Right. Defending herself. There was one of the local media and actually national media referred to her as the defendant in this proceeding. No. She is not the defendant. And yet that's the look of this. And Donald Trump accomplished that. He won those 2 days. I would like to think that Judge McAfee was smiling knowingly throughout most of that hearing and saying, okay, I'm doing this to preserve the record. I'm giving you every opportunity, Donald, to have your due process, no appeal issue here. And hopefully we'll very soon, not the expediency we need with the other matters here, but issue an order saying under Georgia law, nothing here, no conflict, no forensic mispropriety here, no reason to disqualify her. Now, let's move on with discovery, motion practice. Let's get back to the trial here. And that should also be the subject of an awful lot of coverage by the national media saying that this was fun, this was interesting, this was salacious, but it has nothing to do with the personal interests inside the office. Maybe it matters for HR and other people, but not a matter that goes to the legitimacy of the prosecution. There's no conflict of interest here. I think Judge McAfee will find just that.
James Santel, last 60 seconds for you, my friend, and thank you so much for your generosity of your time today. FBI has arrested Alexander Smirnov again. This guy who's providing information, false information regarding the Bidens. Jim, I asked you before, I mean, you brought people, witnesses in cases. Do you believe that the Republicans didn't know what they had? I know this is some speculation, but what's your thought there, man?
Right. You can get documents from the FBI, as some of those in Congress did. This is, again, talking about origin stories. This is the origin story for the impeachment of Joe Biden. I hesitate even to say those words, right? But that's why this is significant. You can get some discovery from them. The FBI comes out clearly and says, okay, just because we've got information about this fellow, just because we've got a document where he now lied to us, doesn't mean that that's a credible basis to go forward either in the middle of the Congress or in a civil or criminal court. And again, a grand jury looks at all this and says, probable cause that this fellow lied. We're indicting him under federal law. He's in and out of prison as late as this morning, as you just indicated. And that's, again, an important message for Congress to know about.
20 seconds, Jim. Any potential liability for the Republicans who brought forth this evidence?
Well, of the Congress, you're immune from the things that you say in that body. They say things outside. That's a little less clear. But an interesting question to raise, protected inside the Congress itself.
James Santel, former attorney, friend of ours. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it, as always.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Dom.
Folks, we'll be right back.
WMDX.
Darcy Haber, I hear you have solar.
Jim, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Nate, great fun as always. Tell Don the same, and we'll catch up again next time.
Yeah. I'll see you next time you're on.
Thanks a lot, Nate. Have a good night. Take care.
You too, Jim. Bye.
So you really walk your talk, huh?
Yeah, I even walk to work.
Come on, always.
Well, sometimes I bike, and if I have an appointment across town, I use my solar panels to charge my plug-in.
Solidarity Realty. They're real, they're solid, and they're honest. Check them out at solidarityrealty.com.
You know Ignite Glass and Gifts 3 locations in Madison, but you can also shop IgniteGlassandGifts.com. You'll find grinders, lighters, collectibles, hand-blown glass water pipes, artistically designed jewelry, and plenty of other items delivered straight to your door or to family and friends. Madison's favorite for glass, gifts, and vape. Ignite Glass and Gifts. Monona Drive, Williamson Street, and Odana Road. Plus IgniteGlassandGifts.com.
Warning, listening to the Devil's Advocates may expose you to opposing views.
The Devil's Advocates radio show, our last segment of the day. If you got something to say, hit us up on the lines at 844-967-2789. Nate will slightly screen your call. I want to thank our friend James Santel, former U.S. Attorney, host of Morning Cannoli, I believe on Saturdays 9 to 11. Check him on the civicmedia.us website. Find out all you need to know. Jim, a very smart, very gracious, very kind man. Always appreciate it when Jim comes around. I got to tell you, I love having smart friends. It's like having friends that are good cooks. You always eat well. You know what I mean? When I'm talking to smart people, I always learn something. Think about it. So thank you for joining me and allowing me to share with you some of the knowledge of the friends that we have, and we certainly appreciate it. 844-967-2789. Real quick, breaking news. Love this. I'm kind of a nerd in this way. Washington Post is reporting Intuitive Machines makes first U.S. moon landing in 51 years. What? The spacecraft, dubbed Odysseus, is on the lunar surface and is communicating with the ground. It is unclear, however, what condition the lander is in or what position it is in, although the broadcaster said it was a successful landing. Tim Crane, Intuitive Machines Chief Technology Officer, said, "We can confirm without a doubt our equipment is on the surface of the moon, and we are transmitting. So congratulations." Well, you can have the equipment on the moon, but if it doesn't translate, it could be in a big pile of rubble. But thankfully, apparently, it's on. So how is it that we go, 50 years without going to the moon? I mean, you got to think there's some money there somewhere, right? Can we get Tang and Velcro from moon stuff? Anyway, love to hear that. As a science fiction nerd, I think we need to be doing more of this kind of stuff. Brings people together, Once again, 844-967-2789. To the conversation, to the point we had with Jim right at the end. As Aaron Blake notes, another GOP Biden informant, in quotes, another indictment and linked to Russia. And I hate to even bring it up because we know Russia. We hear from Trump, Russia. Well, yeah, you know what? If you weren't, engaging with Russia, maybe it wouldn't be a Russia thing. A little bit on this, as Aaron Blake writes. In one way, it's shocking that a key person, the GOP's efforts to dig up dirt on the Bidens, has been indicted and tells prosecutors he has extensive ties to Russian intelligence. In another way, it's altogether familiar. And again, breaking news on this front. He was arrested. He was released. He was re-arrested. Again, the special prosecutor didn't think it was wise for him to be out and about. He's been re-arrested. And again, this is the same prosecutor who's prosecuting Hunter Biden. So, whatever that's worth. But my concern is not the fact that people will say something for money. We know that's a fact. Not the fact that people would lie for ideological reasons. We know that's always there. It's the fact that Republicans would, I assert, know this. They knew this. I don't believe, and I'm not fans of Jim Jordan or Comer. I didn't know who Comer was until this session, till this House session. But I don't believe they're dumb men. I don't believe that. I don't believe they're unintelligent. I think they know exactly what they're doing. And that's my question. If you know that a quote-unquote witness is feeding you bunk and you run with it and you jump on it and you present it out there as fact for months and months and months, aren't you part of the conspiracy then? And if it's true that this information was provided and fed through Russian sources directly into the veins of the mega, and they're putting this out there as fact, and it come to find out that no, Hunter wasn't in Ukraine. No, there wasn't a $5 million. No. Well, should there be some sort of consequence beyond shaming, beyond, an electoral consequence? I mean, if you're taking the resources of this country in a political effort to undermine the executive branch based on lies fed to you, perhaps knowingly, from our Russian adversaries after years of conversations and fighting about whether or not Russia tried to interfere. They did. 2016 election. And that's a bipartisan Senate. It happened, folks. I know you don't like to hear it. I'm going to tell you again. Russia did attempt to interfere in our elections. Russia does. They are an adversary. This is what they do. And they seemingly have more and more willing lackeys in the Republican mega. And I don't understand this. I remember growing up in the 80s, man. Ronald Reagan, man, he freed the hostages. Oh, he was my hero. Well, of course, when I got older, I found out that he was, dealing behind the scenes and delayed that for political purposes. And of course, he did the whole Iran-Contra thing that he traded arms for hostages, and forget about the drug trade. But anyway, there was a time when Republicans were very, very, very against the Soviet and the communists. Now, it's one thing for, Donald Trump to sit there and say, oh, you're a Bernie Sanders communist and you're a socialist and you're a Marxist. And, they use these terms interchangeably. Like I use Republican and MAGA and fascist. I don't want to be too rough. Almost interchangeably. You can almost say the same thing. But there was a time the Republican Party would be aghast, at least to my perception, at something like this. Anyway, let me get back briefly to the Aaron Blake here. This isn't even the first time we've learned that a person has been indicted after the GOP cited his claims. Nor is it the first time a person has been linked to Russian intelligence after the GOP leaned on their version of events. The cast of characters Republicans have sought to substantiate President Biden's purported corruption over the years has come to include a half a dozen convicted and accused criminals, as well as multiple people in the U.S. government has linked to Russia, corruption, and subverting American democracy. It's almost like there's a gang out there trying to do this. The most recent example, Alexander Smirnov, whom the government said last week had invented the claim that Biden and his son Hunter took $5 million in bribes. That allegation was promoted far and wide by the Republicans, many of whom treated it as fact. The government then said this week that Smirnov has extensive foreign ties, including most troublingly, and by his own account, contact with foreign intelligence services, including Russian intelligence agencies, and has had such contacts recently. Days before the indictment was unsealed, House GOP impeachment leader James Comer called Luft. Now, who's Luft? Gal Luft. The government said had skipped bail after his indictment for alleged arms and foreign lobbying transactions. Apparently, this guy had a lot of information on the Bidens. Luft was called a very credible witness on Biden family corruption by Comer. Not to be outdone, Wisconsin's own Senator Ron Johnson said shortly before the unsealing that Luft had a wealth of information on the Bidens. Smirnov and Luft are hardly the only ones to have faced criminal charges or penalties, or whose credibility could otherwise be called into question. There's a lot of that. Victor Shokin, right? We could go on and on and on. We've talked about it. You know the drill if you listen to the Devil's Advocates, and you should. Every single day we bring you the greatest radio show ever. Thank you for hanging out with us. Crudy's back tomorrow. It's Friday. We air the grievances. Stick around. Busted Pencils up next on the Civic Media Network.